You're listening to Nakedly Examined Music, a podcast about songs and songwriters. My name is Mark Linsenmeyer. My guest for episode 231 is Bill Champlin. He started playing professionally in Northern California in 1965, founding Sons of Champlin, who put out 8 albums of funky, often intricate tunes between 1969 and 1977. He then went solo, moving to LA, where he quickly became a highly sought-after, award-winning studio background vocalist and released 2 solo albums. During this period, he also co-wrote 2 Grammy-winning singles, first Earth, Wind & Fire's After the Love Has Gone, 1979, and then George Benson's Turn Your Love Around, 1981. Another co-writer for the first of these was producer David Foster, who was starting to work with the band Chicago, and if you recognize Bill's voice, it is probably from that period. He was in the band through their hit-making Chicago 16, 17, 18, 19, 21, lasting from 1981 all the way through 2009. You're right now hearing Please Hold On, a track from their biggest seller, 1984's Chicago 17. He had 5 solo releases during the first half of the 1990s, and since leaving Chicago, he has released 3 more solo albums, one of those under the name Wonderground. He reformed the Sons of Champlin and has had a new studio album and a live album with them. He's released 3 albums with Champlin Williams Freestead, the Williams being Joseph Williams, son of composer John Williams, current lead singer of Toto, and has otherwise continued to collaborate heavily, in particular with his wife Tamara Champlin, a great singer-songwriter in her own right. We will discuss the song Alone from his latest solo album, 2021's Livin' for Love, then look back to the title track to He Started to Sing from 1995, and look all the way back to Right On by Sons of Champlin from Welcome to the Dance at 1973. And we'll conclude by listening to Plaid by Chicago from the legendary, long unreleased album Stone of Sisyphus, originally recorded in 1992, not actually released till 2008 because it was too adventurous for the record company. For more information, please see BillChamplin.com. For more about this podcast, see NakedlyExaminedMusic.com, and support the effort if you'd like at patreon.com/nakedlyexaminedmusic, which will get you an ad-free feed and my detailed notes for this episode. I will play a little bit of Please Hold On from Chicago 17, 1984, co-written with not only your producer David Foster, but also Lionel Richie. And actually, the reason I thought to call you at this point is because I had just talked to J.R. Robinson, and I see that he played drums on that, uncredited on that album. I guess I've heard you talk about Chicago a little bit, just in terms of having a lot of studio guys fill in the parts as opposed to just it being an organic band thing.
Yeah, sort of David Foster's basic MO is to bring in his cats. I think it was probably David on Moog bass, Mini Moog. Drums is John. This was originally going to be a song that was written with David and Lionel. And David played me a cassette. How about that? That's going back a ways. And Lionel was singing funkier than a 3-day-old Band-Aid. Man, he sounded good. And apparently James Carmichael was Lionel's producer, said, this is too R&B for the album that you're going to be making. You know, and he's, in other words, it's too black because Lionel had access to a real serious crossover thing. They wanted to kind of keep that in play. It's just commerce-wise, more money, sell it to more bigger audience. Anyway, so Foster said, I know just the guy. He handed it to me. I kind of wrote the lyrics, most of the lyrics. I think Lionel had Please Hold On, and the rest of it was do-do-do-da-da, scatting a melody and stuff like that. Still great. Really good singer. So we put it on a Chicago record. I remember we were flying to Japan, and the road manager said, here's a song, I think it's one of Foster's. I don't know who's singing it. I don't know why I even have it. He was playing back rough mixes of the 17 album. And he was playing it back, and he said, I've never heard this before. And he played it. I said, oh, that's me. Oh, okay, there we go. So it ended up on the record.
So yeah, interesting that got included with such a far from the band, as opposed to, I was just listening to this morning to your bonus track that finally came out for Chicago 16. That would have been your only sole writer credit, Daddy's Favorite Fool, which I think actually is going to have a lot in common with the first song we're going to talk about in detail, because it has, yes, it's a nice breezy feel, but it also has some weird little chord shifts and chromatic things that
I don't even remember.
You don't even remember?
Don't even remember writing the song. I mean, it came and went that quick.
Okay, well, so you're not sad that was that.
Something I had to learn when I started doing vocal dates, singing background vocals on things. Usually the background singers, where they're going to sing is at the chorus. why they call it a chorus. And that's where usually the hook is. So I had to learn how to go ahead and sing that, 150 times a day just to get it tracked and get it done correctly, and then go home and not rewrite that line. So I kind of had to teach myself to forget. When you walk out of the studio, that song is in the past. So I've been listening to the radio and going, man, that sure sounds an awful lot like me. It is you, dummy. That kind of thing.
Well, let's get to the very recent past. Your last solo album, Livin' for Love, 2021. The song that I had picked off that was Alone, which I think is plenty catchy. Not that it would be an 80s top 40 hit, but it's got a very catchy chorus, and it has the little twists and turns that I think were typical of what would have been acceptable in pop music, in 1981, that kind of thing. Do you want to say a little about where you're at with this record and this song before we hear it?
In some ways, I'm looking for the simplest song. In other ways, I don't care. I want to take it elsewhere where it usually doesn't go. And that Alone was one of those. It just seemed like, wow, I can do this. And I just eventually ended up writing it, the way it ended up coming out, playing on it and doing the whole thing. So Alone was, it was a little more progression oriented. You got to realize after working with David Foster and Jay Graydon, those guys were all about progressions. I've always been one that kind of goes for a little more complicated, might not be the word, but a little more musically connected progressions, even though they're not really popular at the moment. But I kind of went that way. And then when I kind of fell into this West Coast thing down here, everybody else was doing that too. So I realized, hey, I'm in the same ballpark as everybody. Let's try to make the progressions a little more interesting than the normal thing, which I think is probably the main personalized license plate of West Coast music. It's pop, R&B, put it together and add some musicianship to it and progressions to it. And there's what your West Coast is.
Whenever I call you, nobody's home. Lately you're nothing but gone. Seems like you're always charging your phone. Do you want me to leave you alone? Let me know, stay or go. One way or another, you're looking far and wide. Ain't taking every ride to get what you need, to set yourself free. What you try to find, could be behind. What you have with me is just history. Just history. You're not gonna leave. I guess you'd rather be alone. You think that you're looking for somebody new, hoping he'll turn you around. Unless some big changes happen to you, you soon wanna be left alone. It's the same, just a game. It's always too familiar. You're looking far and wide. Take every ride to get what you
Yeah, so that guitar hook, you said you did everything on this except for the drums, right? That Alan Hertz was the drums?
Yeah, Alan played drums. Actually, Alan mixed it too.
Oh, okay.
He's a great Pro Tools engineer. I think he just finished doing some Bonamassa stuff, and I think he's doing Mark Broussard next. He just moved to Nashville. He was playing drums with the Sons for 10 years, and then he just moved to Nashville because he found a really decent studio down there with a living quarters in the studio, and it was just perfect for him, is what he needed.
So at this point, do you have a home studio? Are you going to a place like his house? Or is this a, $90 an hour minimum?
That's the way to do it. I mean, with Alan, it's pretty much a one-stop shop. You know what I mean? You go in, you get drums on it, and then have him mix it. And he's really, really good at both. I mean, he played drums with Scott Henderson. He played with Mike Landau. He plays with a lot of, jazz balls. And then at the same time, he's one of those guys that really kind of understands. If you're doing ska, he understands the devices that make ska happen. If you're doing shuffly R&B, he's got the devices that'll make that happen, at least on drums, He's a pretty amazing musician, a really good friend, too.
Okay, but all your parts, is that Pro Tools at your house?
My house. I can't call it a studio. If there's a plane going over, you stop.
Sure.
Everybody's got a workstation, yeah. It takes up one wall, yeah.
Okay, so it's not nothing. It's what I guess what is the bare minimum? Just buy a really nice mic and a really nice preamp, and then Pro Tools, and then you're set because you're just doing one thing at a time, or you?
I got a C12, AKG C12, and an Avalon, and that's pretty much what I use.
Okay, like for the guitars, are you using amp simulations at this point? You have a wall of
amps? I'm usually just doing guitar rig. Mostly because I'm lazy. Some rhythm things, I got a vintage 59 plaid Fender Deluxe and an ES 135. Great rhythm guitar amplifier. Just put it on one and mic it, and man, forget about it. Screaming. Everybody says, oh man, Fenders is the only rhythm guitar. And then I realized that all the rhythm guitar players that I like, Al McKay, why do I forget his name? The guy did Ghostbusters.
Ray Parker Jr.
Ray Parker is probably one of the best rhythm guitar players on the earth. All those guys are using like Les Pauls and Gibsons more so than Fenders. Fenders are really cool. I like them just because there's one volume control for every position. You don't have to hit two different volume controls and two different tone controls.
Yes. So with this, I mean, you've got your descending line, that's the hook thing, and then you have as you're getting the transition to the chorus, you open up with this nice little chorus sound. This sort of sounds Dan Huff, sounds like that early 80s Chicago thing that was probably studio guy.
Little chorusing is great. It's also very forgiving for tuning for me.
Okay.
Well, my touch isn't that great. I have really great guitar ideas, but I'm not a great guitar player. Usually if I start playing rhythm, my first thought to myself is like, what would Cropper do right here? And I think of what Steve would do. And I just go ahead and cop something like that. Because Cropper always came up with the brilliantly ignorant guitar parts that are just sweet. One of my favorite rhythm players on the earth, you know what I mean? All those Otis records. Plus, Steve's a great producer and songwriter,
So do you feel like your music theory comes out clearly when you're playing keyboard, but not necessarily when you're playing guitar, that you're not doing the little flatted ninth shapes and things?
Yeah, guitars lean more towards fourthy stuff, and keyboards lean more toward thirds. I was a keyboard player for years, and I'm probably primarily, as an instrumentalist, I'm probably primarily known more as an organist, Hammond player, than I am so much on guitar or even piano for that matter. Every once in a while I play piano and I go, damn, you're rusty. Organ's pretty easy. It's like having skinny strings on a guitar. Doesn't fight you too hard.
Well, let me play a couple sections from this so we can talk about your choices here. Since we're talking about the guitars, let's talk about the guitar solos. Yeah, what made you think we need this sort of giant eye of the tiger sort of thing to come in the middle of this?
A good solo sound, plus I double everything. Mm-hmm. So that's two guitars playing the same lines. I'll play one, I'll decide, I like how that works, and then I'll have to relearn it and play it again and then put it a little bit stereo. I'll put maybe the first track at like 10 o'clock and the second track at 2 o'clock around the middle, because it just makes it a little bigger and fatter. There's machines that'll do that, but I just go ahead and do it the old-fashioned way.
Sure. As that solo progresses, you can clearly hear a second guitar coming in, and the whole thing, in fact, seems sort of like you're purposefully dragging a little behind. Was that?
Usually, if I look at my grid, but at the end of kind of almost any production, I'll find 6 or 7 guitar parts, like a straight skank rhythm part in stereo, and then I'll set up another platform and go in and do a couple of mono lead kind of guitars, and then I'll listen to it. I'll go, well, man, I could use a little chorusy, sweepy kind of stuff right in letter B, or something like that. So it's all comes under the heading of arrangement. I mean, I always look at it as, where does songwriting and arrangement, where's the line between the two? And you write with David Foster, which you're writing with is probably one of the best arrangers in the world. So he brings that to the songwriting thing, and then you write with Jason Sheff, and what he's going to bring, first of all, a great bass playing, but what he's going to bring is a melodic sense that's really, really good. I mean, he's a great melodic writer. So all that kind of stuff kind of makes it, he comes up with really cool melodies. My melodies generally are R&B, blues licks. I'm going to start off as a blues singer, so da-da-da-da-da is going to find its way into every song I write at some point, you know what I mean?
Well, it sounds like the way you're describing layering the guitars is not that dissimilar from the way that you just layer vocals. That, okay, let's just add on another 3. And I can't clearly hear on this song, like, well, how many vocal layers are on that? Like, you've just...
Well, you just start 6 background tracks.
6, okay.
And for a 3-part background, each part double. So you got one on the left, one on the right of the same part, another one on the left, another one on the right of the same part. So you got that. Now, if I want to get into a little more of a take 6 kind of your Jacob Collier kind of voicings, not that I can come near anywhere those guys are putting it, but if I want to add some voicings to it, then I'll have maybe 8 to 10 tracks of background vocals. But the vocals will end up being like 3 parts or 4 parts or maybe even 5 parts.
And are these generally just lightning, like it's much faster just to do them yourself than to bring in Tamara or somebody else, or, Jason, to layer something?
I bring in Tamara a lot for stuff because I don't have the falsetto that I used to. I got the dogs.
Well, is that typically because you have just sort of recorded it yourself as a sample, and then you're like, well, that could be better. Let's have somebody else. And so they already have the exact thing that you want them to sing to listen to, or are you just having them add their own creativity a little bit?
A lot of times bringing in Tamara is just because I don't have the range. I don't have the falsetto range that I used to have. That's one of the things that's kind of going in my pipes. As I get older, the falsetto is one of the first things to kind of start to go. But I got a lot of the other stuff going on. And when I quit, it's funny, when I quit smoking, I was a really bad smoker for years. I gained some range in my full voice and lost some range in my falsetto.
Was the smoking part of what gave you the Ray Charles gravel in the first place, or that was just a sort of a natural thing?
I would imagine so. If I copped anybody, it was Lou Rawls more than Ray Charles.
Okay.
Lou was one of my favorite singers. His phrasing was so on the back end, it was just great. We kind of became friends later on for a little while. And I finally sang on a Lou Rawls record, one of the ones that Graydon produced. He was a kid. Funny, he had this really low voice. And then when he laughed, he sounded like either Theodore or Alvin from the Chipmunks. He laughed, he had this high, squeaky sound. It's like, wow. Coming out of that voice. It was Lou, Funny dude. I had a ball hanging with him.
What you have with me is just history. Just history. All you got from me, I guess you'd rather be alone. You think that you're...
So that choice of how you're going to modulate chord-wise to get back to it, because it almost sounds like, oh, we're going up, we're going to actually modulate the song. But no, it's actually just one line, and then you're back to it. Any thought about just how you're putting these? You said, this is just the way the chords came out. This is the way. But are you thinking in terms of the music theory, or are you?
Once I come up with something that I like, I remember that it was okay. There's a flat 9 in this chord, or there's a something, but I'm not that much of a reader. I've become less and less of a reader as time goes on. Just about everybody I know in the music scene reads a lot better than I do. I just don't. And it was funny because I was reading music before I was reading English when I was a kid. But somewhere along the line, actually, my mother said, my friend has a son. He plays by ear. He's better. And that was the end of my reading. How stupid was that? Thanks, Mom.
Well, so when you're doing all these professional background vocal studio gigs, Are they giving you music, or are they just, here's the lead, put something on it? What was generally the approach?
As a rule, that's the case. At some point in the game, right before I got in Chicago, it started to get where we want a hit, which means we just want oohs and ahs on the letter B. We just want only this, and we don't want you to be creative. Just do what I tell you to do.
Pretentious was the word I got a lot. If it gets too fancy.
Yeah, you're too fancy. We want a hit. And these guys were totally welcome to it, but maybe you should have called somebody else. I mean, there's people that are so good at putting down pads. The Waters are ridiculous. They sound just gorgeous. I mean, all three girls, or even if they get Oren in there, it's really, really good music. They do that really well. It's not what I do very well. Oohs and ahs and pads.
But you do have, like, right, once we get into the chorus, it just seems like in a lot of your songs where you're responding to the choral singers, which in this case is just a bunch of you, but it doesn't have to be a bunch of you, so that you could do. I mean, is that Lou Rawls? Who is the primary influence for that? I'm gonna yeah. You know, I'm gonna respond to myself.
Well, probably, Black Church, probably more than anything else.
Okay, I was thinking there was quite a lot of gospel at the base of what you do.
Aretha Franklin was kind of looking for a thing that was going to be her thing. And what she ended up with was her playing piano and three background singers. So they had to write stuff for the three background singers. And it was the thing that, according to Wexler, it was the thing that kind of set up her personality, her record personality. You listen to most of Aretha's records, there's background vocals on all of them. I mean, during the disco era, which, we did a lot of backgrounds. And then I just started to find out, I started working with David Foster and Jay Graydon. I found out there's other things we can do that are not the normal standard background thing. So I started paying attention to that. I mean, there's a song that I had on the Runaway album that David and I pretty much came up with the background vocal. It's a song called Sarah. And they're gorgeous. It's beautiful the way it's stacked and what's going on with it.
Since we were talking about Chicago 17 a minute ago, I think you arranged the vocals for the We Can Stop the Hurtin', is that right? Which Richard Marx and Donny Osmond, is that right? The Manhattan Transfer-esque thing. Well,
we had three singers in the studio. We had Richard, Robert, and me. We were singing the parts, and they sounded just they didn't sound as cool as they could have. And I thought about it for a minute. I'd been hanging with Donny Osmond a little bit. Now, Donny, when he was a kid, him and his brothers used to practice on Gene Perling Hilo's music. That stuff's difficult. That's really, really voiced out like crazy. So Donnie's one of those guys that can sing that weird voicing, and he doesn't get pulled off to the more easy note. That's how good a musician he is. He's a monster, So I brought him in, not because it was Donny Osmond. I brought him in because he's good at that. We gave him the weird note. You got three notes like this. You put one in here, and it just opens the chord.
Yeah, well, that's like you're writing on keyboard, where it's easy to put the extra finger. And
I remember my engineer, Michael Hutchinson, R.I.P. He's not with us anymore, but he brought in a cassette of Take Six the first time I heard it, and then the first song on their first album. I went, so much for the triad. Whatever this is really good. So I've found sneaky ways for a non-jazz musician to sound jazzy.
Well, let's get another song out there. I want to go back to your string of solo albums in the early 90s. So He Started to Sing. I wanted to play the title track off that album from 1995.
That progression was given to me by Bruce Geitch and his wife, Janie Kluwer.
Okay. I was wondering where that came from and why.
Very, very good progression.
Yeah. Can you say a little about where you're at around this time with this album? Just the fact that, okay, this is your big solo album, but you're still doing these co-writes, like where it doesn't sound like at this point, certainly looking at the lyrics to this, that you're shooting for a hit or whatever. But so where were you at such that you would make this decision, for instance?
Somebody said something years ago that I really took to heart. It says, if it isn't personal, it isn't art. If you listen to Living for Love, there's a song, I think it's the fourth song on the record. It was about my son who had passed away. Another Lie was the name of the song. And I used a lot of the stuff that I used, but it was very personal. There's no way anybody could understand what the fuck I'm saying in a situation like that. At certain times in my writing career, I got to be a little more honest with myself. You hear a lot of people write love songs as though they were still freshmen in high school. And, I've tried to write love songs as though we were 50 years old.
He was a daytime sleeper. He never would go much deeper than his mother and dad expected. Another one so neglected. It was a blessing in disguise, 'cause one day he opened up his eyes and started to sing of love just to find it. He started to sing his way to the light. He was born with the master key to unlock a melody and make it right. He could make it right. They told him to buckle down and pay attention. They taught him to swallow his dreams and his ambitions. So he followed the rules of life by intimidation, to the point where he couldn't find an inspiration. Then he began to wonder why, and suddenly opened up his eyes and started to sing of love just to find it. He started to sing his way to the light. He was born with the master key to unlock a melody and make it right. Lord, he can make it right. He found it a reason to open his wings and rise above his world of pain. It's gonna be the same. He knows it, he shows it, and so he would sing of love. Never again will he beg to be heard by the powers that be. Never again will he change all his words, 'cause he's gotta be free. He's been there before and he's learned to ignore what they want him to see. He'll write down the truth and he'll sing it to you. You don't have to agree. And no one will ever hold him down because of the freedom that is found. When he started to sing of love just to find it. He started to sing his way to the light. Sing it to the light. He was born with the master key to unlock a melody and make it right. Make it right. Make it right. He started to sing of love just to find it. He started to sing his way to the light. He was born with the master key to unlock a melody and make it right. Spread your wings and fly. When he started to sing of love just to find it. He started to wing his way to the light. He was born to sing. He was born with the master key to unlock a melody. Make it right. Make it right. Make it right. The birds in flight. Spread your wings and fly. Trying to make it right. Make it right.
So I guess kind of similarly actually to Alone, that you've got this shift to a more traditional rock chorus. Are you saying that Bruce and Janie, that they brought in the whole progression or just the
whole progression.
the verses? Okay. All right. So this was like some of, your Grammy-winning work.
And it's funny because when I was writing the lyrics, I was in my studio. It was when I had a real live studio. And I had a cassette machine and a pencil and a pad of paper. I was writing down the lyrics. And Tamara came out. She says, dinner's ready. You want to take a break? I said, yeah, but what do you think of this? And I played her the chorus over a cassette of the track that Bruce and Janie had sent me. And she says, my God, you just puts every singer in front of a microphone. He started to sing of love just to find it. She said, you nailed that one to the wall.
Well, we didn't talk about the lyrics of the previous song at all. This is probably a good one to focus more on this. The reason that I picked it, sort of before I was trying to do a proof of concept to you that I can, this is the kind of things, I had not listened to all 5 of the albums from this period, but I was attracted to this because I guess the things I was reading, like, oh, this is his autobiographical song and really is, a sort of a statement of purpose.
Some are, it's real easy to think of a premise of guy, girl breaking up after seeing something, boom, and then you write yourself. You put it back in first person to write against that premise. It doesn't necessarily mean you're breaking up with your wife. You know what I mean?
Sure.
We write a lot of these songs where that's what's going on. And it's, Tamara and I have been married for almost 44 years. We've been together a long time, and we go ahead and write songs like that, but it doesn't necessarily mean that we mean them. You know what I mean?
No, and I think the actual experience of breaking up can be so depressed. I also have been married a long time. I haven't gone through this since I was in my early 20s and was feeling things in a very different way that I do now. But the songs that I would write at that time are not like sad movies. They are like depressing, I want to stab things kind of sort of stuff. That all of these ballads, even if it's a love lost, are sort of warm blankets that people listen to.
Well, look at the lyrics and after the love is gone. God, give me a break.
Yes. Well, and that's fun to think about. To what degree is a funny chord progression like that, a smooth jazz chord progression, compatible with just a pretty warm blanket? This sounds like what you were being told, that if we want to hit, it has to be very major and like the swelling that's in Love Me Tomorrow or whatever, not like...
Yeah, I've never really written songs with that many songs. There might have been 1 or 2 here and there that had that much of a preconceived, we want it to end up like this. And usually I just write it, and if it's good, it gets cut. If it's not good, it doesn't. It's simple as that.
Sure. Back to He Started to Sing. Can you say a little about momentous lyrics that you put together that your wife pulled out as such a statement of what every musician finds? Was this sort of autobiographical, or was this just I'm just writing a like Jack and Diane kind of there's a teen and now he's, a more general song?
No, that one's a little more autobiographical. It's a little bit down at some level. All of us had somewhat questionable upbringing in some ways, and that one kind of came to the fore. In the verses, at some point of the game, the verses like, oh, this was making me crazy, this was driving me nuts and everything like that. And then suddenly one day he woke up and started to sing, and boom, found a way out of whatever that was doing to him, whoever's singing it. You know what I mean? You got to kind of somehow be able to put yourself into the premise, whether the premise is real or not. Otherwise, you're going to end up with a phony sounding song.
I know this was a long time ago. Do you recall at this point whether the chorus, the opening up your eyes, came first here, or whether the lyrics flowed out of your brain in the order that they come in the song, so that you have the depressing part and then...
This one, I think I had written the verses already, that I needed a chorus, and that's what kind of came out in the chorus. I got real lucky with it.
Yeah, I guess there are a number of sort of narrative, such a dreamer, sleeping all day, not pursuing the capitalist path of your parents or whatever.
Not swing into politics because that'll fuck everything. Look how well it's done in the world.
Yes, but obviously the escape from that is just doing music, but actually stumbling on he started to sing and this let him fly, this sort of freedom part, but the actual hook, the key idea, Sing of Love, just to find it.
Love, just to find it. Yeah, that's where the chorus starts, is on that line. And I thought it was a really good title. I'm kind of old-fashioned that way. I find a song on there that would be the album title.
A good concept.
Well, Chicago does Opus 1, Opus 2, Opus 3, It's like, how self-important can we be? Let's get up there with Bach and Beethoven. No. Songwriter once I said, can I rearrange this song? He said, it's fine, man. It's not Beethoven. 4-minute ditty. Do whatever you want with it. then he hated what I did to it, and then it sold that version of it to about 4 artists. It's like, well, on second thought, you might have done the right thing. Anyway, neither here. That's more water under the bridge.
Well, we got again your Aretha Franklin-esque vocal responding to yourself here to add I guess there's a lot about freedom and flying throughout your catalog. It seems like this is sort of the statement of purpose back from the very first Sons of Champlin album is freedom from traditional musical strictures or what? I don't know. Can you say a little more about?
Look at what was going on at the time when I started writing the Sons record. Vietnam was still going on. Mm-hmm. A lot of big problems happening then in the era and I was also just had been introduced to LSD and, the marijuana and the whole psychedelic, not necessarily the party side of it, but the what you've learned from it. And I did a lot of studying up on spiritual stuff and religious stuff and different things like that. I read Kazazaki's, I read Tibetan Book of the Dead. I read a lot of different stuff. It interested me. I found it was interesting. And this is, really, it was kind of late teens, early 20s. And that's kind of where it was going. I was speaking with the lyrics on the first Sons album, the Loosen Up Naturally album. I was kind of speaking to the community, which 6 months before had been peace and love. And right around the time I was starting to write, it was starting to slip into methadone and amphetamines, and it was getting darker and darker by the minute. And that's what I was kind of speaking to on a lot of the songs there. Come on, let's get back to the dancing around the maypole, you know what I mean? To the more innocent side of what's going on. So I was political, but I was kind of spiritually political.
Sure.
Yeah, there's a song called Rooftop on there, and the first line is, I got one thing to say to the fool on the hill, you're going to feel funny on a rooftop. And that was right when the Beatles, everything was, oh, let it flow, let it all, and I was kind of in Marin County just going, it just kind of contrary to popular belief is sort of usually the world that I chose to write from was that guy.
Okay, so you using this trope of that generation, but with your own spin on it, and then it obviously carries through. Even in Alone, that we just talked about, you're trying to make yourself free. That freedom comes up very regularly.
Well, I think what you're talking about in Alone is there's an affair, there's a guy, there's a girl. He's not paying much attention to anything he's saying, and he's realizing this ain't going anywhere. This is starting to fall away. You want to be alone, don't you? Yeah, you'd rather not be with me.
So this is one of those relationship situation stories.
My first divorce and my only divorce was, I was in the early 30s. That was a 17-year marriage that was over. So believe me, I've been in that world, but I don't necessarily want to live in that world,
I almost thought initially with some of the lyrics in Alone that it was about a teen, like your teen child or something, because that seems to be the cliche of they're absorbed in their devices and you can't get through to them. And
I don't care how old they get, you still can't get through to them. Generation Z has got a problem with hearing, I think, is what's happening. We could all stand to listen more than we do. I think it would change the world a lot. I remember when Bobby McFerrin got a Grammy, and he says, I want to thank my uncle for teaching me to listen with my whole body. He said something like that. I'm paraphrasing, but it was something really, really cool. McFerrin is like one of the best musicians, singers ever. And I love what he said there. He says, we could all stand to listen more than we do. To conversation, to music, to cars coming down the street, whatever it is, I think our understanding of our world and the world around us would do a lot better if we listened more.
Let's listen. I've already referred back in time. I'd picked something from that first Loosen Up Naturally album, but actually on reflection and after listening through the progression of Sons albums, I felt like the 1973, the Welcome to the Dance, Right On, is just one of these that then you revived, and there's a live album from 2004 that has a version of it. And I just felt like this was a little more musically developed, fewer words, I think, but a little more interesting. Can you say a little about where you were at around then, 1973, in writing this song?
Well, I think a lot of what kept me interested in it was the time changes. But So it's just a little shuffle thrown in there. I've used it before. It's just a device that I've used before, and I used after that. And that's kind of what got my attention more on Right On than even the lyrics, probably.
Well, let's hear it. Yeah, we have another one. I think this is more coincidental where we've got kind of mellow verses and then we really, rock it up to get to the chorus.
That thing ended up being a really, really great vehicle for a guitar thing.
What you've heard said is true. The change can come to you. How often do you fall in love with someone Write on a piece of paper, write how you feel today, then read it tomorrow. You may be amazed at just how fast a man can change. It's up to us to rearrange. Gotta be right on. Right on. Right on. Yeah. Right on. Yeah. You thought you could find a way. Alone you can get away. How often did you feel the love come shining? Right on across the sky, right on across the sea. Oh, don't let the demon stop you. Right on until you see. Leave behind the memories. Don't you know it's gonna be? Gotta be right on. Right on. Right on. Yeah. Right
To what extent was jazz a part of your initial upbringing? Because you described connecting with folks like David Foster, who were very into these complex progressions, but you were already doing this stuff. You were certainly playing around. It was not super straight ahead. You're in the prog era, right? This is right in the prime of when people are doing their 20-minute opuses.
By any means. I lived around, Jeff Palmer was the other keyboard player in the Sons, really a great jazz player.
And is he playing piano on this and you're playing organ? Do you recall? Or
He might even be playing vibes. He's either playing piano or I know on the record he played piano. I played piano. No, I can't remember what the hell.
Okay. Well, I saw on the live version, the organ part stayed and the piano part went. So I thought probably you were just organ on both, but
I have no idea.
okay. This was a long time ago.
Yeah. Well, the live version wasn't that long ago, but people say, "What did you do?" I don't know. I have no idea. If it happens, it's because it happened, and there's probably a lot of different reasons anything happens. And from one song to the next, it'd be different reasons that are kicking in. A friend of mine I used to do a lot of backgrounds with is a real serious songwriter, Tom Kelly. Him and Billy Steinberg wrote True Colors and I Get So Emotional. Pretty amazing songs. And Kelly, he said, usually we start with the lyrics. And I usually start with the progression. But occasionally I'll come up with something where the lyrics come first, or at least the lyric premise comes first. And the premise is not necessarily the song, but it's sort of the story of what the song's gonna be. So the premise, in a lot of ways, I look at as being kind of a roadmap.
Well, this one, it certainly looks like the music was the emphasis here. Let's actually play that. So around 30 seconds in is when that time change, when it suddenly becomes a waltz for just a little bit. And then we're right back to the verse there. This is another one. It's not about freedom. It's about change. It's still kind of in that same early 70s hippie universe, I guess. Well, just the fact, right on. Yeah. Were you much, much more prolific at this point in your life as a writer? Like
I think right after the first album, I actually sat back and listened to it and went, holy shit, look what you've done. And I found myself just sitting at the piano all week long, just writing songs. If I got one bridge out of it, it was worth it. But I must have written 30 songs a week. And most of them, I went, well, that's not working. That's not working. So, I mean, if you really want to put together a decent catalog of stuff, you're going to write more than what songs make it to the catalog. You know what I mean? I end up throwing away a lot of them. It's like, that's just not good enough. I just don't like where that's going. There's no surprise in it. A lot of real straight pop songs kind of turn me off because there's not even a small bit of surprise. Show me a little bit of surprise and I'm with you all the way. Something that you don't expect. Like, oh, wow, where'd that come from? That's what I've kind of prefer in almost any song that I hear. You know what I mean? Why I like Steely Dan when music started to drag them down a different path. Pretty far from dirty work, you know what I mean, where they are now.
On that He Started to Sing album, you've got the Party in DC, which could exactly be a Steely Dan song. Like that's really got, those jazz chord progressions. But
all those chords and that solo is all Greg Matheson, who's a dear co-writer of mine, and we've written really good stuff together over the years. Matheson is a bad mofo all the way around. Anytime I'm going to do anything, I just go, Greg, I need a shuffle and I need something else. So he co-wrote the second song on the record. And at the end of the record is the one where the whole tag is a Mark Russo sax solo that's ridiculous. God, that guy can play. I lean toward the jazz ball stuff occasionally because I know some people kind of know me for that. So I try to do a little bit of music for them. I know West Coast, my first album, mostly the Runaway album, was considered ground zero for West Coast music, especially in Sweden and stuff like that. But I started to lean back toward R&B, and the West Coast audience just went, well, you're dead. You're dead to us. Not going to happen.
Okay.
What it is you had pop and R&B. They're two different things. And then West Coast kind of put them together, added some education to it, and opened it up. And then when it opened it up, the West Coast audience went, oh, this is so cool. This is so educated. This is so great. Don't get better. Don't open it up any further. We're going to stop it here. And that's kind of what's going on. And I've sort of had a joke lately that the American listener only wants to hear what he's already heard.
So I was, at age 10 or 11 encountering, Chicago 17. I would have been 12 when that came out. All right. Anyway, was thrown for a loop by the fact that, okay, Stay the Night, nice little pop song. Oh, We Can Stop the Hurtin'. What's going on? I don't know if I like that. That's blowing my mind a little bit. Let me listen to one album earlier. Let me listen to the 70s stuff. And that also is like, throwing in, it just, yeah.
Yeah, on We Can Stop the Hurtin', Foster did a key change into the chorus that was really cool. It was the wrong place to go. It ended up being the really cool things, what made it really get up and talk. It was really good. It was me and Lamb and Deborah Neal, I think, wrote the song.
So for Right On, just to ask a little more about that. Right. You've got this wall of vocals, right? When in the second half of the chorus, yes, the change can come to you. If you were just doing that yourself, as we were just describing, you just put. I mean, were you arranging the harmonies for your band? Like, was this 12? When I've tried to come up with complicated stuff like that and teach it to other people, it takes so much longer to get them up, because they're concentrating on their instruments, to actually get them to, like, you got to sing the harmonies this time. Like, it's just an extra layer of, yeah. So how much were you arranging in general?
Takes some serious doing. I was talking to Mindy Abair one time. She says, if you're still on a chart by the second gig, you're off a gig. If you're still reading music by then. And I understand where she's coming from. That made a lot of sense for her, for a situation like that, because mostly instrumental music anyway. I mean, she's singing quite a bit. She's actually a pretty good singer. Anyway, she's a really good friend. She's a nice horn player, nice musician, really cool. But, everybody has a different approach to that. I've just found that I don't want to ask anybody to do something that I won't do myself.
Okay. When you're teaching this to people in 1973, obviously you're not like, here's my demo where I layer myself. You're having to, can you say a little about just that, how the politics, because it seemed like the politics of this band were weird, that you had to actually become just the Sons for 2 albums.
Oh, which band, the Sons?
Yes.
Yeah. There was a point there at some point of the game, we do 21 songs in one night, and there's 19 guitar solos, and the guitar player was unhappy, didn't have enough places to play. In my music, and I love him. We're talking Terry Haggard. He was at some level, he was a real innovator in terms of taking a hard preamp and playing jazz ball kind of stuff through it. He was one of the first guys to do that. So he would apply the technical side of the blues guitar, apply it to jazz notes. Which was, when we were all kids, he was the only guy in town that played the jazz notes. His dad was a great guitar player too. But at some point of the game, when the music scene in California and maybe in the United States started leaning toward jam band stuff, Terry just wanted to do that. He says, all I want to do is just the jam band stuff. And I kind of went, I write songs and I write lyrics. You do too. What do you mean you just want to do that? He says, well, because he was kind of known as a guitar player and I was known as a singer-songwriter. So it ended up being ended up not working. I ended up getting Tal Morris for a couple of years, and then he went with Creedence Clearwater Revisited. And then I had Carmen Grillo, who was an old dear friend of mine, playing with the Sons for about 10 years.
So to conclude the whole song, after the guitar solo has been going along for a while, it goes into this swirl section. Let me just play from 338. Which at this point, it's just piano and guitar, and then the organ comes in later. And
there's more than piano and guitar there. It's just, that's what you're hearing.
Right. I'm just saying that are doing the swirl part is what I'm, yes. Yeah. So, but do you remember, was that part of the composition, or was that what Terry was adding to the end of it?
That was just what was going on. I think he played the solo when we were cutting the track, playing live. So I went ahead with it. He may have recut it, but by that time we'd already played along with a do da do da do da do da do da do. That, which is a 3-against-4 kind of thing. I think he said, okay, well, you can recut the guitar solo and get take 2, but just remember, at a certain point of the solo, everybody's doing this. Act as though you're doing it. You know what I mean? That's what overdubbing is acting like you're playing it live.
Yeah, and that just ends the song. I mean, do you recall, okay, we've had so much guitar, you'd think, let's do one more chorus, let's do something, but instead it just ends in this maelstrom of guitar swirling, and
we've thrown in everything but the kitchen sink. So here's the kitchen sink. Now we're done.
Okay, so it would have been anticlimactic, I guess, to go have another chorus there. Yeah, so that doesn't sound like at least Terry was the kind of guy who would put up with, here, I brought in this 10-minute song, and I want to teach you the arrangement in detail. I mean, even you guys had 10 minutes on, but it sounds like it was maybe more, there was jamming involved in spreading something out to 10, because this song is like 2 minutes, and then with his solo and this end part, then it becomes 5.
You're having a tendency to hear it sound complicated when it was really simplicity that got it. So you're kind of talking to me like I knew what I was doing, and that I was just, the music was taking me in that direction, so I followed it. So, you got to kind of ask the music.
Sure. So no charts in this band. You were not passing around.
No. why we don't do a whole lot more we've got different guys playing now. We've got Bill Gibson from Huey Lewis and the News' band playing drums with the Sons. And we got a guy named Dwayne Pate playing bass, who's just ridiculous. This guy's really great. Monster. So we've got a pretty good Sons band going at this point of the game. We're play a gig or two here and there. Not a lot, but we play some gigs.
So Sons plays occasionally. Is the Wunderground, is that still a going concern?
We're not doing that anymore.
Okay. But is there a separate solo band?
I used Alan a lot, but on live gigs, we were using Burley drumming on drums, his wife Mary on keyboard, and we had Bill Bodine playing bass. And Gary Falcone was playing guitar, and I was playing guitar and keys, and me and Tamara and Gary were singing. And it just wasn't catching air, so I decided to take a pass on it. And then I started the solo album kind of on the heels of that.
And then starting, 2012 up to your most recent release, you've got this Champlin Williams Freestet. There's some live recordings on there, so clearly you're doing shows with them sometimes, or I know Toto is actually...
we went over and we did Japan just maybe 3 months ago, 2-3 months ago. Well, wait, to explain, I haven't done a lot of live stuff because I've had a lot of medical issues I've had to deal with, hospitals and doctors and da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. I don't even want to go into it, but I've had to deal with all that kind of stuff. So when I can play, I will.
Yeah, there are probably not a lot of people, 78, is that what you are now, who are doing a lot of gigs.
Well, I think they're, hey, McCartney, like in his early 80s, he's playing all the time.
Sure.
Yeah. He's a lot healthier than I am. I lost, my prostate's gone. I've had a lot of different cancers and different things to deal with. And I don't even want to go into it. You don't want to hear it. Nobody else does either. So like that.
To wrap up here, I guess, you brought up Greg Matheson. So I feel like I would be remiss if we didn't at least briefly talk about the point at which Chicago was maybe going to become a fully creative, free from hit making and producers and stuff, this Stone of Sisyphus album. So 1992, right in the middle of, when you were doing this burst of creative activity for your own solo albums. So Plaid, I saw Greg Matheson at least has a co-write with you and Robert Lamb.
Robert did a couple of lyrics on it.
Okay. So this is mostly you and
Peter Wolf, who was the producer of that record, was a great musician, by the way. He's unbelievable. And Peter said, well, maybe you and Robert should try to write something so we can get more of this kind of thing going. I said, sure, man, I'll run this one by him and see what he thought. The fact that it even made the album at all. The management wanted us to do a country record.
It's a notorious story. This is an album I was listening to like on bootlegs or whatever before it actually got released in 2008 finally.
They blamed me for it. They said, this was all Champlin. Champlin fucked up. Because, everybody was saying, well, I don't want to have it do anything. I don't want the management to do this or management to do that. I said, how about doing the record and don't play it for the management till it's done? How about that? And I paid dearly for that. Probably what eventually lost me my gig at some point. But, if you want to talk about being now and musical instead of just doing what you've already done, that's something that I like. I like that. I like the vibe of doing that. But, look at right now, there's a Russian group called Leona. Great band. Really good. There's not a bad player in the band, but they've listened to a record. They started off by doing Chicago stuff, and they copy it perfectly. And everybody goes, oh, man, these guys are the best musicians ever. Yes and no. They're definitely probably the best musical Xerox machines that I can imagine. But, it's like one of my things that that makes me crazy about the music scene. People don't want to listen to anything that they haven't already heard.
That is the paradox of you always want to hear something for the second or third time, never for the first. I do. I've obviously.
I remember at one point we put out 17 and the management suggested that we don't play a thing off of it. And Cetera said, that's telling the audience that you don't believe in your new record. I don't believe that we should go out and just do the new record because that's asking for trouble. But we should do at least 2 or 3 songs, maybe 4, from the record just to let people know that you believe in it. So which we ended up doing. And 17 ended up, I think, quadruple or quintuple platinum. It ended up being a pretty big record. And I think the reason why is because we went ahead and played it live, even if after management had told us not to.
Well, and I had Danny Serafine on the show a couple years ago, and I know that it was his dream, and that At this point, okay, we've gotten over the hump. We've done Diane Warren songs and things. Now there's no chance we're going to get on the radio anyway. So let's just do what we want to do and become legendary, become like the Grateful Dead, and, you know, even add some sort of jam band elements to it and just change things up all the time and have it be this something that really takes advantage of these great musicians.
Chicago at one point kind of got it. It was right around when Bitches Brew was out, Miles Davis was gone.
Yeah.
Herbie Hancock was putting out records. There was a lot of playing going on. And Chicago decided they wanted to do that. They didn't do it well.
I guess that's true.
And they really just kind of turned their back on an audience. This is during a period of time when they really should have just been slamming hard. Mm-hmm. But they really kind of wanted to be like musicians. And I don't think that any of them were destined to be that guy. Cetera is a great bass player, but boy, he's a one-of-a-kind singer. Nobody else sounds like him. Crazy to have him sing a lot. You know what I mean?
Definitely opened my eyes. I certainly knew you played with the Sons of Champlin, but I had never listened to more than a song or two. The fact that you were, you know, had just as powerful a catalog behind you as Robert Lamb did when you know, that this should have been a meeting of the maestros or something.
Well, at some point of the game, people's idea and their quotient of success is supposed to be in keeping with their bank accounts. And I've always thought that's a bunch of bullshit.
Well, just the fact that you put out so many things in the early 90s, right when, you know, Chicago's popularity was going down, that like you weren't spoiled by having David Foster and major studios at your beck and call to like, oh, if I can't do something at that level, I'm not going to do it at all. The fact that you just kept being creative and kept powering through, and that we get this recent album.
I got an invitation to sing backgrounds on somebody's record. There's a certain amount of commerce involved in it, but for the most part, I'm not one of those guys that says I'm worth more than this. Unless you can afford to pay me this kind of money, then I'm not gonna do it. I do everything. You know, I take it in. If there's a way, not everything. Every once in a while, I'll get somebody say, co-write this song with me, and I'm listening to it. I'm going, no, there's nothing there. It's like I say, if there's no surprise in there, forget about it. It's not working for me. So, I mean, Tamara and I do most of our writing here. We're right in the middle of one now that's, you know, started to be an added on section to a song I was writing with Nigel Olsson. And I ended up going, no, this doesn't belong here. And he didn't think so either. So he pulled it, and we're just writing something else in the verses to connect with his chorus that we'd written, that we had put in the wrong song.
And does this have a planned destination? Is this another Sons album? Is this a solo album? Do you have any idea?
No, there's no albums until there's an album. You know, I mean, There's just music, there's just stuff. I mean, I asked Sly Stone's little sister, Rose, one time, says, how's Sly doing? This was years ago. It probably had to be 20 years ago. We were doing backgrounds together on something. And she said, Sly's got shelves and shelves and shelves of tapes with new songs on them.
Oh.
Nobody's ever going to hear them. It's too bad. Man, that guy, whoa, forget about it. That's a talented dude, man. That guy did Bobby Freeman and he did Beau Brummels when he was like 18, 19 years old. He produced those records. We Five, he was involved in the production of the We Five. I mean, these are bands in the San Francisco Bay Area. He lived out by San Francisco State. The Stewart family, everybody knew him. You know, plus he was probably one of the best disc jockeys ever. You know, because he'd bring his own stash of R&B with him. He was on K-Soul for a long time, and then he went over to KDIA for a while. That guy rewrote the book for everybody. I mean, there's certain artists that come along that really change everything. Steely really started to change everything when they decided to let the music carry him along. I think they probably did it with the middle finger extended toward their manager. Keep doing dirty work. Keep playing the same thing over and over. Do the same thing because it's making this much money. And I understand the commerce behind that. But it's one of the things, I mean, I'm not a real big fan of Neil Young, but I love the fact that every record he does is a completely different thing.
Well, and he's another guy that just does not stop.
Yeah, I'm just going to keep doing all that kind of stuff. And that's what I love about him. I think Billy Joel was the same kind of guy. I'm just doing what I'm going to do.
Are you saying that Billy Joel did not actually stop writing songs? Because I thought that he was the polar opposite of Neil Young, that once his last record, 93 or whatever, wasn't selling as much as he expected, then he's just like, no more for you. I have enough money. Music is now for me. I'll play live and make my money that way.
Well, how many pieces of music that he produced before that.
Yes, he earned his retirement. I'm not I'm not begrudging him.
Up until just a little while back, he was doing a 1 month show, once a month at
Madison Square Garden. All right. Well, this is great fun. Thanks so much for chatting. Yeah, we're going to play Plaid. Have a great rest of your day.
Oh, man, I haven't heard Plaid in 100 years. It's nutty, kind of a funny piece of music. Anyway, great. Thanks, Mark.
Some will say it's too late, so don't change your story. There's too much at stake to grow. Yesterday was so great, just bask in the glory. Don't let your feelings show. And I say, oh yeah, like a man with a condition. I wait for my heart to stop. Oh, they say, stay down, got a plan, hold that position. You can afford a fly. Like my suitcase with my game face, play the same place and put away the dreams I've had. Let my hair grow, buy some old clothes, let the world know that my politics are bland. I'm not asking for permission. Are you ready for me to be me? Just pass the ammunition. These prisoners about to bust free from the chain. For so long you told me to keep it familiar. Just play what they all will buy. I can wear this blindfold and stick to your story, but I gotta ask myself why. And I play those songs for so many seasons till I'm sure I'm losing my mind. And I say, oh no, gotta have a much better reason to leave all my dreams behind. Always changing, rearranging, stay the same thing and become your favorite fan. If you see through, I gotta be true. I can't be you. Polyester comes in play. I'm not asking for permission. Are you ready for me to be me? Lord, pass some ammunition. This prisoner about to bust free from your chains.
Thanks so much to Bill. Given our mention of Billy Joel there at the end, I can't help but think of his announcement from this last weekend. I actually had tickets to see him this summer and have never seen him live before. If you didn't hear, he has some brain issue and has canceled all of his concerts, but Bill Champlin is still playing out there. I see there's a Sons of Champlin gig this coming Saturday. You can check out all his events and other things at BillChamplin.com. He's definitely had his share of health issues, and he mentioned to me that he heard things about some of the folks in Chicago, so I don't think they're going to be touring much longer either. Now, I had anticipated that we would have talked more about Champlin's Williams Freestead, which is the closest thing to a Chicago-like unit that Bill is playing with right now. I have linked to a full set of theirs from the blog post corresponding to this episode at nakedlyexaminedmusic.com. And you can hear more of what he did with Chicago, with Sons of Champlin, with his wife Tamara, from links I have posted there as well. I don't know that I realized when I reached out to Bill how this would really step on such a seminal point in my music upbringing. I really didn't listen to the radio. I mostly listened to classical music and folk, whatever my parents would play, before about 1983, at which point I was taping stuff off the radio all the time, very into the pop music of the time, Michael Jackson. But Chicago is one of the first album bands that I got into, and I really liked the detailed arrangements, which I guess mostly David Foster was responsible for at the time. So this is when I was like 6th, 7th grade, and I retained my fondness for them, even as they became a guilty pleasure through the 80s, 90s. And so as I've researched further for this episode, I remain fascinated with Chicago, but the level of toxicity, the strangeness of some of the business decisions, it is very odd what you have to do to keep a band going for that long, particularly one with that many people in it. It has to make a certain amount of money. As I told Bill in this interview, I didn't realize that Sons of Champlin had been producing just as much music as Chicago had in the late 60s and throughout the 70s. Some of it very stylistically close to like the very first Chicago album. It would have been absolutely seamless to put in one of the big Sons of Champlin song from 1969 right into the Chicago set, but that's just something, given the ideology of that band, there's no way that that would ever happen. Though they did, I saw eventually when they did a set of concerts with Earth, Wind & Fire play After the Love Is Gone, that Grammy-winning song that Bill was a co-writer on for Earth, Wind & Fire before he was in Chicago. So Chicago eventually played that song with Earth, Wind & Fire. But given the sheer talent and brain power available in that band, it seems like they didn't actually make maximal use of that because they were more concerned with staying on brand, even though that meant doing more and more ballads of the type that Peter Cetera had made them famous for, even though Peter Cetera wasn't even in the band anymore. And to date, playing pretty much the same set of hits dating back to their first albums. Anyway, if you want to hear more about Chicago, I'd also interviewed another ex-member, drummer Danny Serafine, a few years ago, so go look up that episode. Between this and the recent J.R. Robinson interview, I feel like I've gotten a little opening into that LA early 80s session scene. Hopefully I can interview a few more people from that era. It's very strange to me, so different than, for instance, what I talked to Dean Wareham about in my last episode, that New York punk descended thing. Speaking of Billies with health problems, I wanted to give a shout out to one of the publicists that I've gotten many of my interviews from over the years, mostly the prog rock ones. That is Billy James, who I actually even had as a guest on here. He passed away within the past couple months. So that is a terrible loss, but I'm glad I got to talk to him directly and get his help with so many interviews. I'm sure some of you would not be particularly sad if I had a fewer prog rock related guests. So maybe that's an upside of this tragedy for those of you that feel that way. I want to remind you, you can go to patreon.com/nakedlyexaminedmusic to support the effort. I welcome your emails at mark@nakedlyexaminedmusic.com. If you want to suggest guests, perhaps suggest yourself as a guest, make sure, of course, that you are subscribed directly to the Nakedly Examined Music feed, whether the public version of that or the Patreon one that will get you ad-free episodes. If you like the podcast, please leave a nice rating or review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen. You don't want to miss my upcoming episodes with Chris Church and then Jorma Kaukonen, that is the Jefferson Airplane lead guitarist. I hope you support the artists that I promote here, and hopefully you're inspired to keep creative, keep on musicking. Until next time, this is Mark Linsenmeyer signing off.